My name is, we're going to get going in a couple minutes. My name is Scott Prendak. I'm the Deputy City Planner in the Planning Division. And I know a lot of people have the yellow cards, and you'll have an opportunity to speak on the item you heard about tonight. So when you do, you can bring it up to the table. Keep it with you, ma'am.
Why are you handing mine in? You got them in your hand.
Okay. And then you can drop them off when you come up. So you can do that.
So good evening. Thank you all for coming. This is the meeting of the Rancho Review Board. Just before we start the actual meeting and presentation, I got into some procedural stuff with the board members and the board members, and that's we're going to do the oath of office. So bear with us for a few minutes, okay? So if you can all please stand. Once you have the questions, actually, I'm going to read it and we can. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California. That I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. Congratulations. So just a couple of things to start the meeting. It is an advisory board. This advisory board is actually written into the city zoning code. It's very unique. It's the only advisory board that we have. This one is specific to the Rancho Review Board. And under the city zoning code, it actually says that when there is a development review project or development review application, that before it's actually considered by the city through the development review process, that as part of that review that we actually bring it to the Rancho Review Board to get their input, and that input is to be provided to the Community Development Director, which is actually my boss. I'm the Assistant Director of Planning. My name is Fred Ramirez, and we have Lindsay Hagan, who's our Senior Planner. We have Scott Plambeck, he's our Deputy City Planner, and we have Mary Riley, she's one of the Senior Assistant City Attorneys, so she's going to be presenting as well tonight. So we have some procedural stuff to go through initially, but just wanted to let you know, so there'll be a call to order, there'll be a roll call of the board. We don't have any really announcements other than what I'm telling you right now. And then there's items for discussion, which will be the Brown Act open meeting law discussion. We're not going to select the chair and vice chair because we do have some people that are absent, so we want to make sure we have the full board before we do that. And then why you're probably all here is for item number 3, the pre-application for an amendment of the general plan land use designation for the property at 814 South Mariposa Street. And then we will have an opportunity under item 4 for public comments not on the agenda, and that's limited to 2 minutes, but you will all get an opportunity to also provide input on all the items, and during that period there will be a limit of 3 minutes. So I wanted to make sure you were aware of that as well. So with that said, since we don't have a chair and vice chair, I will call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of the special meeting of the Rancho Review Board for the city of Burbank. It is, and my watch is probably not as accurate, 6:06. So with that said, we will call the meeting to order, and I will do a quick roll call. And just say here, as I call you. Board Member Lisa Cunningham.
Here.
Board Member Carrie Pelayan.
Here.
Board Member Glenn Cooper. Here. Board Member Rosie Dean.
Here.
Board Member Steve Taylor. Here. Board Member Louis Lynn Westfall. Board Member Noreen Reardon. Board Member Anne Marie Tanga.
Here.
And Board Member Madonna Fowler.
Here.
So for the record, I believe it's Lois Lynn Westfall
That's correct.
and Steve Taylor.
No, it's Noreen Reardon.
Oh, Noreen Reardon, I'm sorry. Those are the two board members that are not present. So we have 7 of the 9, we have enough for a quorum. So we will now start the next step in the process. First item on the agenda is as I mentioned, as part of each item, you're going to get an opportunity following the presentation to make public comment. I believe there's some speaker cards that were made available. They've been submitted, so we will call you out by name, and then you can come to the front and you'll be able to provide your comments. Due to the size of the number of people that are here, we're keeping it to 3 minutes to provide that input during each one of the items. And then, as I mentioned before, if you wanted to talk on an item not on the agenda, if you think is relevant to the Rancho Review Board, you'll be able to do that under item 4 for those non-agendized items. So with that said, we will start with item 1, which is a presentation by our city attorney regarding the Brown Act open meeting law.
Sir, excuse me, there's a lot of people standing back here. Can you ask them maybe to come around if it's
Sure.
okay with you? Yeah.
Sure, so we don't block the aisle. If you want, if you can we can walk and you can stand on either side here, to the right or to the left of me. And if there's seats that are open, amongst you, people can just let the others know. Sure. We'll as you make your way, we're gonna bring the seating a little bit forward as well. There are additional chairs up front if some of you want to come to the front. There's some additional. The one thing, if you can all help out, is please keep the exit doorway unblocked, so some of you can come to the front. We'll put some more chairs here. And bear with us, we'll start in a few seconds on that first item, trying to put the chairs out. Just one last time, we'll make the announcement again. If you don't want to stand, if you want to sit down, there are chairs available along the back wall on both sides, and there's 1 or 2 chairs here in the front. So you don't need to stand in the back. You can actually, there's chairs in the front over here to the left for you to sit down. And with that said, we'll start with item number 1, which is the presentation by the City Attorney on the Brown Act.
Thank you for having me come tonight. Actually, you had nothing to do with it. Thank you to the staff for setting this up. Whenever there's a new group that starts that's subject to the Brown Act, our office is asked to come to discuss what the Brown Act means and how it applies to you. And if at any time you have questions, please feel free to ask, or if you think of a question later, feel free to call me. My name is Mary Riley. I'm a senior assistant city attorney. Or you can call basically anyone in our office, and we're happy to help you answer any questions about the Brown Act. So let me start with the Brown Act is in the state government code. It deals with open meeting laws, and it applies to you. And it was adopted in 1953, so it's a really old law. It was really brief in the beginning, and now it's many, many pages. But there are two principles that have never been changed, and those are the principles I'm going to be talking about tonight because they're the most important. The first of the two is that the intent of having public commissions, boards, and councils is to deal with the conduct of the people's business. And therefore, it's the intent that all of their actions be taken openly and that deliberations be conducted openly. That's a principle that remains true today. The second one is that all meetings of a legislative body, which I'll explain applies to you, shall be open and public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the legislative body, except with limited exceptions in the Act for closed session, which should not apply to you. But the two principles still remain extremely important and relevant. Since the council created this group, as was explained through a zoning amendment, that the Rancho Review Board was created to advise the community development director, that action was taken through ordinance, and because of that, your body is considered a legislative body subject to the Brown Act. And everybody has the same rules when you are considered legislative bodies. The city council follows this, the planning board, every public body in the city. The first extremely important thing is that all of your meetings must be conducted in the open and in public. It's a very simple concept when you have meetings structured like this and staff establishes the meeting time and calls you. But the Brown Act, which has been modified through the years, has a very, very broad definition of meeting. It states that any congregation of a majority of the members of a legislative body, which in your case would be 5 members since you have 9 total, at the same time and location, hear, discuss, deliberate, or take any action on any item that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body is a meeting. So that's really broad. That's 4 people who just happen to be at Starbucks talking about a matter within your subject matter jurisdiction, which you heard Fred describe that, and it's any project subject to DR in the Rancho. So that's a very broad jurisdiction. And if you take any steps to talk about those items, deliberate about those items, or even just sit there and listening to the people next to you talk about them, you could be unintentionally having a meeting. And you don't obviously ever want to do that. So it's a numbers game, first of all. So a majority of your board, if you're anywhere near a majority, you should perk up and say, okay, I've got to notice what I'm doing. You've got 4 people, and you have to be careful. Yes?
Is it 5 or 4?
You have 9, I'm sorry, you have 9 members. So a majority of 9, yes, is math. So it's 5. Thank you. Thanks, right. Yes. Okay, so other than math, forget, that's good. Now, like any law, there's exceptions. I mean, you're allowed to have social activities. You're allowed to go to functions that are open to the public. You're allowed to go to seminars. it's okay if a developer holds a meeting and invites everybody as a public meeting. It's a different set of rules if the city works with a developer to hold a city like an open house for that developer. If the city is involved, then the exception does not apply. It has to be something the city does not control, and it's a function otherwise just open to the public. But there's a caveat in all of those. And you probably can guess what it is. So 5 of you, thank you, 5 of you could not stand in the back of a meeting place that's otherwise open to the public, and then the 5 of you start talking about matters within your subject matter jurisdiction. And that applies whether you're at a social event or at a seminar or at an open house that a developer is hosting that is open to the public. And that's the easy part with meetings, but that you can bump into and unintentionally violate. The time that it is really troublesome is when you could have a serial meeting. And what the Brown Act says is that you can't obviously you can't talk to each other when 5 are present at once about matters within your subject matter jurisdiction, because that would be a meeting that the public has a right to be there. But sometimes there can be a series of communications that, you may not see all 5 people. So you may not think you're communicating your ideas to all 5, but it can occur. So one way is what's called a daisy chain. So member A speaks to member B speaks to member C to D to E. Before you know it, if those 5 people, if E at the end of the game knows what all 5 people are thinking, that was an unintended, but in violation of the Brown Act, serial meeting. So you have to be careful if people are trying to find out like what you're thinking about a project. The second one could come in play even more. It's called the unofficial terms here are the hub and spoke. And it's kind of, if you think of a wheel, if there's an innocent party even, a neighbor, comes to you and says, what do you think about this project? Goes to member B, what do you think? Member A just said this. What do you think? Member C, member A and B think this. And then D and E. If you go to E, you've got 5. And if member E then is told by this otherwise innocent neighbor that A, B, C, and D think this, how do you think? You have just created a meeting and you violated the Brown Act. And that can happen because individuals don't know they're doing that to you. So you really have to be alert whenever people start talking about other people's thoughts and opinions on a project. You can play the numbers game and say, okay, I'm only counting 4, I'm okay. Or you can just say, I don't want to do that because I could unintentionally violate the Brown Act, and it's not fair to the public. This is the forum where you should all be deliberating on projects. The next way you can violate the meeting, which is so easy and so unintentional, is with email. And what can happen so easily is if one person sends out an email, it can be as innocent as sending out a newspaper article to everybody. And it could be of a project that may come before you. And that alone does not violate the Brown Act. But what would violate the Brown Act is if one person said, oh, I can't stand that project. The next one says, yeah, they need to change this. And you can see, you've got all 9 people on the reply to all list, and you've just violated a meeting, the meeting requirements of the Brown Act, because you are deliberating outside of the public. So you have to be very careful. We suggest that you never do a reply to all. Reply to a staff person and ask them to forward it to individuals. It can really be problematic. And good luck with Facebook and blogs. Those are really troublesome. And the Brown Act does not catch up to technology as quickly as we wish it would. So right now the same rules apply. And if you're on Facebook and you're all chatting about something, that is the same as if it's email reply to all. So you really have to be careful on social media. And so basically, That's the rule of meetings. It's not as easy as it sounds. I mean, this is simple. And, if you want to keep it simple, you can just say, I only want to talk about things at a meeting. But I'll leave it in your judgment. Yes,
So you said it for subject matter jurisdiction.
yes.
So what is our subject matter? Is it anything that has the word Rancho in it? What is,
Your subject matter jurisdiction is in the code, in our municipal code, and it says you shall be formed to review all development review projects in the Rancho Master Plan area that are subject to development review. So any project that meets that criteria, which is a lot of projects. Excuse me. So other than having, every time you have a meeting, the public has a right to be present, the next question is how does the city assure the public to be invited to an open and public meeting? And the Brown Act, which I personally believe is a big flaw, believes that this agenda that gets posted, and I'm sorry I don't have one before me, but this agenda that you've all gotten is the tool to get the word out to the public. And it has to physically be posted in several places 72 hours before the meeting, and it now has to be on the website. But that's it. That's the only notice that is legally required. I don't know if you did more notice?
We also did, because previously the prior Rancho Review Board, when we were reviewing the, and I'll keep it short, it's not on the agenda, but in the context of noticing, when we talked about accessory dwelling units in the Rancho area, the Rancho Review Board met at that time, and there was a question that if large projects or projects of great concern in the Rancho Master Plan area came forward, that it was suggested that we do courtesy notification of all properties within the Rancho. So in this particular instance, you received or should have received a courtesy notice, and the courtesy notice went out to all properties in the Rancho Master Plan area, not just residential, but even the commercial received. Well, based on the database, we sent it to all, so it's approximately about 1,200 notices that were sent out, which is well above the code requirement, which for a development review project of this magnitude, it would be notification by law of all property owners of record at 1,000 feet from the project site. So just wanted to make sure that was something that we did in this particular case, and in light of that, as projects, whenever they are made available to come before the Rancho Review Board, we will do a similar courtesy notification in addition to the required 1,000-foot radius notification to the property owners.
Thank you. And that 1,000-foot notification, though, is for the DR action, not for this board. So the additional notice that Fred just referred to is just something that the community development director wants to do, which, again, under your duties, your jurisdiction is of looking at development review projects for compliance with the zoning article is pursuant to procedures established by the community development director. And it's my understanding that those procedures are still being developed and will probably come back at your next meeting. And that's one of those procedures, is additional noticing. So as you can see, the agenda is crucial because that is a legal tool to tell the public what you're going to be talking about. And the reason why Fred said, if you don't mind, I'll go a little bit more, even though it's not on the agenda, I mean, he was aware of that, is because the body cannot address something other than what's on the agenda. Now, so what that means is there's a brief discussion about items, but there also has to be an opportunity for the public to comment before you make a decision. And if the public comments on something that is not on the agenda, the Brown Act doesn't expect you to just sit there and say, oh, I wish I could answer you, but it's not on the agenda. It does allow you to make a very brief response. But if there's, we kind of have, there's no clear-cut line on what is a brief response. But I think, yeah, I know, it's, I think if you're on this side, you sometimes know, but it's difficult sometimes when you're responding. But, so please keep that in mind, that if there's more than one or two of you who wants to respond, it may not be brief. So you may want to ask that it be placed on an agenda if that's possible, to bring that item back. And that will be up to, the community development director. But you are limited to what you can talk about, to what is on the agenda. The public comment that's being done is a little bit different tonight than how we normally have public comment at boards. And the way it's being done, and very consistent with the Brown Act, is before any deliberations or discussion on an item will be occurring, there will be an opportunity for the public to come and address the board, or the commission, the board, I'm sorry. So if anybody wants to get up, in a second, I'll be finished, and talk about the Brown Act to you, they will have an opportunity to do that when I'm done. And then the next item, it too will have a presentation, and then public comment will occur as to that item, and then the board will discuss and hopefully make a recommendation on that item to council, or to the community development director, I'm sorry. So the last part of the Brown Act is what happens if you blow it. You unintentionally have, coffee with 6 people, and you make some statements about a project. Call Fred, let him know, but don't worry, your world is not going to end, the DA is not going to chase you down. But we need to keep it on track as a learning experience. We don't want that to happen. But if it does, as I say, we need to help you not do that again. There could be unintentional violations, especially with email or Facebook or other social media. And again, try to catch yourself and apologize to people and say, I can't continue this discussion, and let Fred know. I mean, it's really important he knows, because we can use it all as training, because if you did it, somebody else could have done it. And unintentional violations, they're fine. I mean, I don't want to encourage them, don't get me wrong, but don't think the world is over. Intentional violations is another story, because it can result in a criminal misdemeanor, and you could go to jail. I mean, you could. There is a district attorney division on the Office of Public Integrity, and they are watching for Brown Act violations. And if they come and think they find one, they will send the city a letter, and obviously the city council would not like to see any of those letters, and they would want to understand exactly what happened, and we have to figure out what to do from there. So I just want you to know that it's an important law. It's really the cornerstone of public meetings, and without the public participating, there's no reason really for any of us to be here. And your goal is to advise the community development director, and the public's goal is to help you give the best advice to them. So I thank you for listening, and again, if you ever have questions, please feel free to call.
Is there an approximate timeline just for the agenda tonight? Let's say when the presentation starts, or when we'd be able to make public comments?
Yes, I think the Brown Act presentation is pretty much done. So unless there's someone that is interested in or has a specific question related to the Brown Act, then now it's the opportunity for public comment. So you can come up to the front, and I'll put this on the stand. And this is the 3-minute response to the Brown Act, right? Correct. Or comment, I'm sorry. Are there any takers for Brown Act? Anybody want to speak on the Brown Act? Take that as a no. All right. With that said, the second item on the agenda was going to be the actual selection of the chair and vice chair. However, I'd like to request from the board if we could continue this item to a future meeting, just so that we have all board members in attendance at the time that we go through that process of making nominations for potential chair and selection of a chair, and do the same thing for the vice chair. So if there's concurrence, if I can get, we'll just go down the line, and just if you can raise your hand and say, or if everybody's fine with that?
I concur.
All right, seems like it's unanimous. Thank you. So item number 3. Pre-application for an amendment to the general plan land use designation for the property at 814 South Mariposa Street. And just wanted to make sure, and are you going to go over the purpose and process? Okay. So Lindsay Hagan, the senior planner, is going to walk you through item number 3, including purpose and suggested meeting procedures, as well as the project background and presentation. While we're waiting for that, let me just, as far as the presentation, there's a part that doesn't need to be on the screen that I can walk through now. Purpose and suggested meeting procedures. The purpose of the meeting is to present to the Rancho Review Board, a pre-application for an amendment to the general plan land use designation for a proposed single-family residential subdivision. We're seeking comments or feedback from the board to the community development director. That's consistent with what your obligations are as a board under the city zoning code. The scope of the project review before the board is on the request for an amendment to the general plan land use designation, and not on the merit of the specific project proposal. As the details of the project are not part of the pre-application review, and I think that's important to note the big difference in that, and that is under our code, it allows someone to make a request of the council to seek an amendment to the city's general plan land use designation. As part of that process, council, that's fine, thank you, ma'am. As part of that process, council requested that before that item of a request come to them at a notice public hearing, that the Rancho Review Board be given an opportunity to provide feedback to the community development director through this process. So, as noted before by the city attorney, outside of that request from the council, the item would not have come to you until we actually had a development review application. So, but in the interest of wanting to have greater transparency and an opportunity for feedback and record of your discussion as well as public comment on the request, the item has been brought to you at this juncture. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear both to the board and the public. The focus of tonight is to get input regarding the request for the general plan land use designation amendment that has to go before the council in the coming weeks. Staff recommends to the board, so this is part of the procedure, that the following meeting procedures be followed. 1, we will give a staff presentation. The applicant will then make a presentation of their request, which has to do with the general plan land use designation. And as part of that, they'll reference project components. But the focus is on the general plan land use designation. The board will be given an opportunity to ask questions of both staff and the applicant if they so desire. And then we will open it up to public comment. The public will be given an opportunity to speak for 3 minutes. There are speaker cards available. You can fill one of those out, provide them to us, and then what I will do is I will call the names out one after another so that people can come up and provide comments. If they have questions, they can also provide those. And what we'll do is try to take the questions and kind of compile those and then provide short responses to those. Subsequent to that, the Rancho Review Board will then have an opportunity to discuss the request that's in front of them and then provide feedback to staff so that we can then bring that forward to the Community Development Director. And if there is a consensus by the board, then there could be a straw vote, in other words, a vote of you to make kind of in unison a recommendation that would go forward to the actual director itself. Okay? So with that said, I guess we have a presentation back. We'll turn it over to Lindsay Hagan.
I apologize for that. Good evening, Rancho board members. My name is Lindsay Hagan, and I'm a senior planner with the Community Development Department. Tonight's item is the review of a pre-application request for a general plan amendment at 814 South Mariposa Street. The 4.7-acre industrial site is currently occupied by Applied Invention, a technology and manufacturing business. The site is located in the southeast portion of the Rancho master plan area and is adjacent to the LA Equestrian Center to the east, Circle K Stables to the south, an existing single-family residential neighborhood to the west, and then Dinkara Road Plan Development residential community to the north. Through the pre-application process, the applicant, MLC Holdings, is requesting to study an amendment to the general plan land use. The current designation is Rancho Commercial, which is shown in brown here on the map to the left. And this land use designation permits low-intensity multifamily residential as well as commercial uses. The applicant is requesting to study a low-density residential designation shown on the map on the right in yellow here. And this designation permits 0 to 14 units per acre and is the same general plan land use designation that exists for the majority of single-family residential neighborhoods in the city, including the residential properties in the adjacent area. If the City Council authorizes the pre-application request, then the applicant could proceed with submitting a formal application to go through the plan development review process for a new residential subdivision. As the applicant's plans showed, which were attached to the staff report, they are interested in creating a 34-unit single-family residential horsekeeping plan development. However, as Fred went over, the details of the project are really not the focus of the meeting tonight, but rather the request to study a new general plan land use at this location. So just to ensure that we're all kind of on the same page, I wanted to make 2 points to the board. The first of which is really the relationship between the general plan and zoning. So the Burbank 2035 document is the city's 25-year vision, known as the general plan. It covers high-level land uses throughout the city, in addition to setting overall goals and policies for the city to achieve during that time horizon. One way to implement the high-level land uses identified in the general plan is through the city's zoning regulations, which are represented by the zoning code and specific plans. So these are really kind of partner documents that cover development standards for various areas of the city, such as height, setbacks, the specifics, if you will, uses that are allowed or uses that are not allowed. The zoning ordinance covers the general areas of the city, such as the single-family residential neighborhoods, while specific plans cover specific areas of the city, such as the media district or downtown. So in the case of this project, the site has a current general plan designation of Rancho Commercial that does not permit single-family residential development as a high-level land use. So the applicant has filed the pre-application request to study the low-density residential land use that would allow them to proceed with a residential subdivision project. The second point that I wanted to make was about the process. The applicant has filed a pre-application for a general plan amendment, which essentially is asking permission to study a general plan amendment. So typically when the pre-application is filed, it is reviewed at a city council public hearing. In this case, the city council did request that this pre-application come before the Rancho board since it is within the Rancho master plan area. So as I think alluded to previously, the comments we hear tonight will be forwarded on to the community development director and ultimately will also be attached as an exhibit to the city council staff report. And just to let everyone know, the city council date at this point has been scheduled for October 24th. And at that meeting, council can make two actions. One, they can either authorize the pre-application request to study the general plan amendment, which would ultimately allow the applicant to submit a formal application, at which point the city would then review the actual amendment as well as any associated development project. This would also include any environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act would be reviewed at that point as well. And through that process, if council authorizes it, the project and the general plan amendment, as well as any environmental review, would come back before the board for discussion. So that's where you could talk about the details of the project as well as any environmental concerns. The other option is if council does not authorize the study of a general plan amendment, then the applicant, basically they can't move forward, they cannot submit a formal application with their proposal. So I think a lot of times people may ask, why does this process exist? It's pretty much to ensure that resources such as staff time is not overly burdened with studying land use changes without allowing council to basically preview the request ahead of time. So with those points covered, the question that we have before the board tonight is really, does the board majority support or not support the request to study an amendment to the general plan land use designation from Rancho Commercial to Low Density Residential at 814 South Mariposa Street? I won't repeat a lot of the information Fred just said, other than to say that as any kind of decision that's made by the board tonight, if the board or council does authorize or support the authorization of moving forward with the general plan amendment, it doesn't mean that the board or council supports the details of the development project itself, because that's not before you today. So with that said, Fred already went over the procedures, so at this point I will ask the applicant, MLC Holdings, to come forward and give a presentation.
If the board does not support it, does it get stopped in its tracks then, or it's just advice? And what's the point of having a majority?
So
Let's just do this. Let me do this real quick. Let me just, maybe we didn't, what we're going to do is this. The procedures that we mentioned earlier to the board, and we'll get to the question that was asked, but what I want to do is let's just make sure we kind of agree to some guidelines, and the guidelines is this. We're going to give an opportunity, we made a presentation, we're going to give an opportunity to the project applicant to present their project, and then we'll give an opportunity to the public to ask questions of the process as well as the project that's in front of the board, and then we'll respond to those. I would just ask that we give an opportunity for people to present, and then we give an opportunity for people to speak to allow them to make their point within the period of time allotted, and we maintain a certain level of civility, both between the board and the public, and vice versa. And staff will do the same. But if you guys can just entertain the idea of making comments from your chair is really difficult because we're trying to kind of record and take notes of the comments. So if you will entertain the idea of just coming to the front at the time that's given to you to comment, then we'll compile those and then respond to them accordingly. So let's just, if we can do that, that would be helpful, because I know if we go to recognition now, then it's going to potentially turn into something where we're having a lot of comments happen from the public, and we're trying to gauge what that question is and what's going on. So if you could please entertain
and respect that request. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ben.
Good evening, everybody. It seems very kind of tense in here. I usually would wear my jacket with the big target on it, but that's at the dry cleaners. But I think you all know who I am. I'm the big bad developer guy. Thank you all, seriously, thank you all for coming out tonight.
Would you identify yourself
yeah.
by name?
Yes, absolutely. My name is Lester Tucker, and I'm the Vice President of Forward Planning for MLC Holdings. I do appreciate everybody's participation, and I'd like to thank staff for all the hard work that they've put in over the last several months to put this meeting together. This is an opportunity similar to the one we had a few months back when we held a community meeting for you to really get to know who we are. I think we operate very differently than maybe what most jurisdictions and most neighborhoods might be used to. As I shared at our hearing at the Equestrian Center, we are here to listen. We are here to cooperate. We are here to create win-win scenarios. Otherwise, we're not doing our job. And so I just have a few brief comments about who MLC is, and I'm going to turn it over to Aaron, hopefully to demonstrate to a great degree that we did listen at the meeting, and it's nice to see some of the familiar faces out there. MLC is not a household name. It stands for Meritage Land Company. Meritage Homes Corporation is out of Scottsdale. We were started in 1985. We've built over 100,000 homes since then. We're currently operating in 9 states and 22 different markets throughout the U.S. And we have about 220 actively building and selling communities with construction and sales professionals out there building neighborhoods. We build and sell homes for a living. We build the American dream. In Southern California right now, we have projects from Santa Clarita to San Diego, 17 some odd projects under development, sales, or entitlements. MLC's focus is strictly on infill, urban development where we're repurposing underutilized pieces of property to try and solve the housing crisis in the state. 34 units at a time. But we're processing complex entitlements, land use, even especially in Burbank. It's at a fever pitch. It's such high awareness for everybody that we're only successful if we engage you all, if we listen to your input, if we try to be as compatible with the existing neighborhoods as possible. And we've been very successful over the past several years in developing a number of projects and receiving approvals on a number of projects. We're currently entitling stuff in the Bay Area from Vallejo down to Fremont, and in Southern California from here all the way down through San Diego. And we deal with people. Yes, we can talk about the homes. Yes, we can talk about the impact of everybody's #1 problem, traffic and density, 2 problems. And we will talk about those things. We're not going to hide from those. We don't suggest to you that change is easy. We know that it's hard. And that's why we take a different approach. You're going to find us to be very transparent. I hope you found that in our community. Our approach is that, hey, we're going into these people's neighborhoods. They've been here for 50 or more years. They've been here for 30 years. They've been here for 2 years. It doesn't matter. We're changing the status quo. And that's hard. And that takes cooperation. That takes transparency. That takes people living up to what they say they're going to do and doing it. So we're going to demonstrate to you folks, hopefully tonight, that we've done that from our outreach, from our proactive communication style, where we're sending things out to you without being asked, because we do want your engagement, your feedback, and we will incorporate that to the greatest degree possible and still try to make a project work. This is it's tough for everybody. We approach all our developments like this. We we've recently gotten approvals on really tough ones, and so we hope that you guys can appreciate our efforts on that. At this point, I'd like to kind of turn it over to Aaron, who has been the steward of, I can't count how many variations of plans and attempts to create the best, most compatible community within what is an extremely unique area. So I'll turn it over to Aaron, and we'll go from there. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Lester. As you see me reaching down here, I'm just switching slides. Just from the turnout tonight, it's obvious how passionate this community is about the Rancho, about Burbank, and we are excited about this opportunity. And for those of you that this might be the first time you've seen our proposal, our site plan, and I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a background of kind of where we've been and how we got to what you're seeing today. I know Lindsay went through this. That's the project site south of West Riverside. For years, the Photosonics operated out of the site. It's still shown on Google Maps. And currently, it is an underutilized industrial site with some creative offices and some industrial design space by Applied Invention. When we first looked at the site, and don't be alarmed, that's not it, we do yield studies. We look at a site, before we even talk to the neighborhood or the city or anything, we just say, okay, what do we think would work? We thought at first the Rancho Master Plan dictated the use on the site. The Rancho Master Plan showed like 20 dwelling units per acre. I know it sounds crazy. It is crazy. An attached product doesn't work here. We know that. We came first. We just did a yield study. I had 10 dwelling units per acre. It showed 47 houses. This is just a real draft thing. This is kind of our process, how our thought process goes. From that point, then we do our best to reach out to any city decision makers, any neighborhood people that we've heard about that are active, and we start kind of going through this process of weeding out what works and what doesn't work. So over the next few months, we reworked that initial plan. We had a few phone calls and a meeting with city staff or two, and we met with a couple of neighbors in the Rancho district. The overall feeling at this point was, just from our initial discussion, was that a residential use was acceptable. And now we kind of felt, okay, well, what is that residential use and what's it look like? So we went from 47, just an initial yield study, looking at down to 43 units. There's some guest parking in there. We left some room open for some internal sidewalks. Yeah, thanks, Matt. Sidewalks and whatnot, and we just kept it going. We continue to rework the plan. Okay, next slide. Thanks. To what you see here. Now, we had some input from staff saying we need internal sidewalks, some open space area, maybe a horse trail buffer at the south where the stables are down there. And then we submitted this to staff, and we received some initial, preliminary comments. Hey guys, just to make sure we're being consistent with other residential zones and whatnot. Not for any vote of confidence or anything, just hey, we wanted to make sure we were providing the parking we needed and providing circulation and whatnot. They give us some comments on architectural design, the lot dimension setbacks, the horse easement path you see there, guest parking, and we incorporate these comments. And then, after that, we reworked the site plan again. And we added color too. There you go. And then we reached out again to staff. We reached out to some people in the Rancho. We reached out individually to the council members, and we asked them for their input. And again, this was just us trying to figure out where we needed to be. And you know what the council said? They said, reach out often and early to the Rancho. Yeah, that's what it said. So they're smart. And obviously, from the turnout tonight, it's obvious. It's the most important thing about our project. We get it. We're not naive enough to think that we can get through this without listening to you guys and taking your comments into our site plan and what we ultimately end up doing here. They said, think horses, horse lifestyle. Create lots that have opportunities for horse keeping. Self-consistent with the R1H zone. So then then they also said, spend at least 3 months reaching out to that Rancho neighborhood. And then go hold a small neighborhood meeting if you can, walk the streets, whatever you can do to get them involved. I see some familiar faces here, but I also see a lot of faces I've never seen. And I also want to say, after this, even after comments, please feel free to just come up to us. I've got cards, my number. Feel free to reach out to me personally, and you can vent anything to me. I can take it, and I want to take it. I want to listen to you guys. So over the next 6 to 8 weeks, we did reach out to more neighbors. I walked some streets and talked to some people. And then we held a small neighborhood gathering. I purposely tried to make it small. I wanted to grab as many people on Morningside, Dinkara, Valley Heart. I wanted to grab as many just right in that vicinity. So we had about 25, maybe 30 people meeting where I presented the following plan. So that was at 38 total units, and then this one was at 36. I apologize, sometimes I forget the unit count because it's adjusted as we've gone down and we met with more people. That's what happens. So this is the plan we presented. Lester and I did to the neighborhood meeting, about 25 people. And at that meeting, this is the following stuff that we heard. More horse properties, no homes fronting on Mariposa Street, because, see those ones entering on Mariposa. Maintain a buffer between Mariposa Street and our projects at our development. Some people in Dinkara didn't want horse stables backing up against their house, their backyard. Some people in Dinkara also didn't want second stories looking into their backyards. They asked us to remove the community stable and instead make room for larger lots and more horse keeping potential. Less density, and incorporate elements of the Rancho Master Plan, design architectural elements. So then we spent probably a month or so working on that, and yeah, and that's where we are today. And that's where the site plan, that's the kind of the renditions it's went through, just so you guys all know. If this is the first time you've seen the site plan, it's not that we just slapped it down on paper. We spent over 10 months working on this. So to comment on some of those comments we received at small neighborhood meeting, we went from 6 horse properties to 18. We turned our houses to face internally for Mariposa, which affected our yield. Again, we also created a buffer with a 8-foot bridle path, a walking path, and hopefully if we can keep some mature, those sycamores out there are unreal. Actually, all the neighborhood streets have unbelievable trees, and so we'd like to do whatever we can to maintain those as well. We also got rid of the horse stables that are backing up against Dinkara. We were also told that horses are communal and they need to be together, so get as many horse stables as close as possible to each other in the lots. Also throw a little side note, I don't personally know that much about horses. I was real honest to the small meeting, and I've only rode a horse once, but that's why we're trying to listen to you. You guys know horses a lot better than we do. So we clustered our horse properties together. Then the second story in Dinkara, see those 9 homes up above? We actually created a custom product. We had our architect, a product we've never built before. And we had a custom product that goes to a single story in the rear and no windows face Dinkara. So there's no privacy looking into the Dinkara backyards. And then we removed the community stable. We were told that just wouldn't work. Instead, we gave some more square footage to the lots and spread it out and tried to create more horse-friendly lots or horse-usable lots. And then we lost density. We dropped 2 more units. So, and then finally, go next slide. Then finally, we started incorporating, because now I know we're at a pre-app, a Rancho review board meeting for a pre-app to a GPA, but we still wanted to add some detail to show you guys that we're thinking about the Rancho Master Plan, we're thinking about the Rancho. We started incorporating elements like the river rock and the intro monuments. This is taken directly out of the Rancho Master Plan. The street signage, the way that works, hopefully you guys still like what's in the Rancho Master Plan. That's straight from the Rancho Master Plan. The landscaping is as well. We picked landscaping. And so we started incorporating those elements in the architectural design of the homes. So this is just an interior elevation. We've got our board and batten cottage home there, and we got the ranch style next. Trees in the front yards, internal sidewalks. Next slide. And there's some other views of some of the homes in the interior. You got a shiplap with a ranch style stucco and then board batten. Next one. And then here you've got another style of the architecture in the interior. Just to give you an idea of the interior streets we are conceptually thinking it would look like in that. Next slide. This is a street view of how this would work. We'd have some additional improvements on Mariposa. I think it's 16 foot in asphalt or so around here. I think it would go, still think it gets to 26 for fire purposes, but in the remaining, we were proposing to do this buffer with this bridle path, and then it can be and a walking path in the interior of that, and then the mature landscaping. And then next one, an overview. That's kind of an overview of how it would be existing on the other side of the road. And then then we come back to the area where we are today, with the current site and the current limited industrial use there, and then where we'd like to go. But we want to hear more input from you guys. And so that's how it is today, and then we and that's how our site plan does layer into the existing community. Oh yeah, thanks Matt. So, and that's about it, I just want to reiterate from what Lester had spoken, we are excited to be here. We do get it. We don't live here, right? But we do get this as a passionate, unique neighborhood. It's as unique as any neighborhood I've worked in. I came from a fairly unique neighborhood. I understand people being passionate about where they've probably grown up and where their kids grow up and where their kids grow up. We're excited to be here, and we look forward to getting a lot of good input tonight, and we're here to listen to you guys. Thank you.
So just a reminder, so the next step is we've got staff that's made a presentation as well as the applicant. Now it's the opportunity for the board to ask questions before we open it up for public comments.
Just to clarify, how many units are we at now on that property?
There's, in the last iteration, there's 34 units.
So, yeah, I asked how many units were there?
34.
Okay, which 18, you said there's 18 homes with stalls, correct?
Yeah.
Less than 50. And how did you determine that?
We determined it, well, as we went through the plan, we were trying to find which lots were either designed a certain way that would allow for a horse access, and to get to the backyard that also had some clearance between the house and the rear property line that would allow for a stall, and that's where we put them. We also understood that, where I've worked in a couple horse equestrian neighborhoods, and there were much larger lots,
Right.
acre lots, right? So I also understood, but I walked into a few houses and I would have never thought a horse or a stable would have been back there, and somehow there was a horse back there, and it fit by a 5-foot side yard or something. I hear it's fairly common here. It's almost like an urban equestrian neighborhood. It's unique, but that's how we figured out those 18. We also use from the R1H minimum. There's minimum 6,000 square foot minimums on R1H, but it's called out for 1 per 3,000 square feet. So we use that as well as a gauge.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lester and Aaron. Can you talk about those 9 units and how big the square footage is on those houses and how big the lots are?
The houses are, I think, approximately 2,600 square feet, and the lots range from the high 4,000s to the fun, and then there's one in the mid 5s, I believe, and the one on the you call the northeast is it's that odd shaped one. It's in the above 9,000 square feet.
You're referring to the...
Oh, sorry. You want me to? I can actually. I can help you. I can highlight it.
There?
Let me. can do this, and I can do this. So she was talking about these, those homes that I'm highlighting right there. So this is north of 5,000. These are all the same size in here. I think they're 48 or so, 4,800. This one's it's odd shape. It's about 9,300 square feet. I did distribute the lot size matrix. Hopefully you guys got it. I gave the staff and Rosie got it. And that's got the exact square footages on it.
So I'm correct in looking at this that virtually no front or backyards on these, right?
Well,
I mean, I'm not an architect, but,
no, they're in terms of those 9 there.
no, I'm just talking in general. Well, some of the bigger ones I see, but I'm only relating to my lot is 6,000.
Right.
I don't have a horse, I guess I could, but I consider my lot to be small. And some of these are 35, well, there's one on the side here, which is 3,590 square feet, so I just want, where's the yard?
Well,
Is there a yard?
Well, no, there are yards. Those yards are anywhere from maybe the smallest backyard at the 15-foot setback, but the majority of them are well over 20, 25 feet from the rear of the house. Some as many as, as much as 30 feet. It might not seem...
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm just not even
Yeah,
seeing that.
Thank you. So, south of Riverside, the average size lot is 8,639 square feet. If you look at Morningside and Valley Heart and Mariposa, that's the average of those lots. There's about 89, 90 houses in that area. If you look right next door to Dinkara, that parcel is actually bigger than your parcel, and they have 22 homes on them, that average 8,474 square feet. So when you talk about compatibility with the surrounding area, there's a
Disconnect.
big chasm there, because compatible would be in the 84 to 8,600 square foot lot, which would, in your parcel, be about 22, 23 houses max.
I understand. Yeah, our square footage of our lots are smaller than the Dinkara ones, and they're smaller on average than the average of South and West Riverside. I will tell you, in terms of the single-family detached product, Dinkara, I believe, was maybe approved in '89 and built in the early '90s or so. It was a different time in home building. There was different. There's different types of development getting built. Our homes are very efficient. They do incorporate an indoor-outdoor flow, and not much I can say except, yeah, it is smaller than Dinkara.
As time has gone on, obviously, all of the home prices have appreciated. Our home prices aren't probably compatible with what many of the homes sold for originally in this area. I would offer that there's a difference between compatible and commensurate. This piece of property is a piece of property that is very unique. When many of these homes were built, there was not the employment opportunities that are located here. There was not the traffic problems that were located here. There was not the housing crisis that we all live in today, where many people have to move to 45 miles east and a 2-hour commute in order to get to a job center such as this. So as times have changed, architecture has changed, lifestyles have changed, floor plans have changed, lot efficiencies have changed, and we're not trying to be identical to what you have. We would not suggest to you for a minute that we are being exactly like what is in the Rancho today. But we are doing everything we can to be compatible with what is in the Rancho today, more so than an industrial use that you have now, that you saw on one of the slides earlier. But again, we've heard many times the concern over the number of homes. We continue to try to craft a project that will stay together and reduce the number of homes. As Aaron went through the number of iterations, the Rancho plan calls for up to 20 units per acre. We knew that wouldn't work because we understand that this is a single-family equestrian neighborhood. We started at half of that, and we've continued to ratchet it down and improve the quality and improve the layout to the best that we can. But for us to sit up here and tell you you're going to have all 6,000 square foot lots, we can't do that. But we can do everything we can to promote a very high-quality equestrian neighborhood that will be governed by CCNRs, that will support and defend the lifestyle that is the Rancho.
What is the average? I don't understand square feet as much, so what is the
Are we on
average
public
height?
comment or are we on?
Is it like 50-foot lots?
Currently, just a reminder, as I mentioned before, there'll be an opportunity for the public to come up and ask questions that we'll respond to, but right now, it's an opportunity for the board to ask questions of staff and the applicant, and you'll get your chance. I guarantee we will make sure that you'll get a chance to ask that question. Bear with us.
So the question I wanted to ask was, I see that it says you have a 23.8 foot average.
Can't hear us. Speak up.
In your handout, it says that you have a rear yard setback of 23.8 feet. And on 18-year properties, you have conceptualized a 12 by 12 stall, I think.
Yeah, can you repeat it from the beginning? I just didn't hear the beginning part.
Not sure the question, sir.
Well, the question, it's a little preamble to the question.
Yeah.
You've got this 23.8 foot setback average in your property in the back. And 18 of those properties you suggested are horse properties with a 12 by 12, I think that's your size stall in the back. What's left? I mean, this is about 10 feet from here to that wall. Is that the backyard?
In terms of, no, the backyards aren't 10 feet deep.
Once you drop a 12 by 12 stall into your 23.8 foot.
Well, in terms of the specific design and exactly what backyards we're dealing with, I think, because the backyards vary almost in every single lot here. There's some that, are shallower, 23.8. There's some that are 30 plus backyards. But yeah, and in terms of if you had a 12 by 12 stall in one section of the backyard, yeah, that's it. If that backyard was 23.8, yeah, you'd have 13.8.
And are all the properties where the stalls are located, are they larger backyards?
We tried to make as many of these ones that we were making as horse keeping lots. Yeah, we tried to pick the larger, bigger backyard lots.
And then as I read it, there's a 5 foot opening to come down between the houses?
It varies on all, some have much larger. The tightest would be 5, but the majority have greater. And I can, as we go later on, we'll provide a real dimension side so I can give you exact angle and everything.
So I'm going to be on the same line, looking at lot 2, lot 4, lot 5. They are only 3,696 square foot lot, where you have a horse stall on all those lots, and you have probably a 2,071 square foot house. Where is our horse going to be? Except in that stall. And how is it going to get out if you've got 5 feet between the houses or 5 feet on each side of the house?
The houses are designed with a minimum 5 foot clearance. In all cases, it's at least a 5 foot clearance between the side yard wall and the home in order for us to have the right amount of, a minimum amount of space for a horse to get through there. In our discussions with some of the neighbors, some of them have 4, most of them have 6, but we're proposing a dimension right now, months and months and months away from what would be a specific detailed site plan. So what you're looking at is schematic in nature. It is intended to be a proposal. Do we think we can support a single-family residential neighborhood general plan amendment here as opposed to those precise dimensions. And I can appreciate that these details are very important to you and they're very important to people here because it speaks to the lifestyle. We have to design to support the lifestyle, and that's what we've been in the process of attempting, and clearly there's going to be refinements over time, but in the main we're trying to create an additive community to your urban equestrian oasis that is the Rancho. And so to add as many possible horse properties as possible to the community was one of the comments we heard at our public meeting. Are all 18 of these properties ideal? Definitely not from the giggles I'm hearing. Are we taking this into account and we'll take this feedback and continue to refine our plan? Absolutely.
What size horse were you using?
Aaron said he doesn't know anything about horses. He just got back from, he's got some My Little Pony dolls at home that he puts on the...
We have a couple minis in the Rancho, but that 3,000 square foot lot with a 2,000 square foot house.
Thank you for your comment. I appreciate it.
Again, thank you for your time. I noticed there's one way in and out of the division. As a safety issue, or is there was some kind of evacuation need? It's all on all our minds lately. Does it make sense to have, and I'm just putting it out there, how did you come to the one driveway, one street thing? And can you talk about 1 versus 2? Can you give us some feedback on that?
Yes, thank you. And it is heightened awareness for everybody who's been impacted by everything going on. Great question, great observation. There are some very specific development standards around fire and life safety and what developers call circulation, but what most people know them as how do the streets lay out? How do you get in and out? What are the clearances? What are the turning radiuses? What are the lines of sight to make sure that you have safe intersections? We had gone through a number of iterations. Some of them did have 2 points of ingress, egress, or 2 entrances and exits, if you will, through discussions with staff and them talking to others in the city engineering and public works department. The safest arrangement would be for the community to align with Morningside Drive so that you have a very clear intersection there and lines of sight. And that's how we landed with the proposed entrance that we have today.
Okay, so my question then would be to staff. What is the current law, code, in terms of building? What is the size of a house that can be on a lot?
So it ultimately is dictated by the zoning district in which it's in. So for an R1 single-family property, the maximum FAR is 0.4, so 40%. And that could mean not necessarily 40% of the lot can be built all on one level. It may mean that to achieve the 40%, people might have to build a second floor.
Okay. Do these apply? I mean,
So-
my question is, something like this, is this gonna change all future building, whether it's just not the Rancho, but all of Burbank?
So I think you have two questions there, really. The first one is, what the applicant's actually proposing is a planned development. So it would meet its own standards in terms of setbacks, heights, and FAR. So that's kind of the first part. The second part of your question, I think, was about setting a precedent. So we, as a city staff, can only review projects as they come in. So we would review them as they come in. In this case, they are proposing as part of their project, if it does proceed, to do a plan development, we would review it as a plan development. So it doesn't mean that anyone could come in and build that same standard. They would have to ask for a plan development.
Okay.
But I think it does, if I'm, please correct me if I'm wrong, because if I'm understanding this, they're asking for a zone change, and that's a general plan amendment to get a zone change, correct?
So it's not quite. So the general plan designation is kind of the high-level land uses that you're allowed. So in this case, the site currently is primarily commercial uses you're allowed to have there. You're not allowed to have a single-family home on the site today. And that's at the general plan level. So the zoning is under the general plan. It's basically the specifics, the nuts and bolts of how you actually implement that land use. So it's the heights, the setbacks, the zoning districts. So in this case, the request before you is just at this high level general plan, is a residential, low density, residential appropriate for the site. The actual details of the zoning, the plan development or the development itself, the height, the setbacks, would only be analyzed and discussed if it's authorized by council to move forward. So yes, if council does authorize the project and does authorize the study of the general plan land use changing to potentially the low density residential, then as part of their project, as they have shown it here today, it would include a zone change to go from the M1, the light industrial that it is today, to the planned development designation. So that is a zone change.
Okay, but to Noreen's point, we have some large lots currently in the Rancho, 22, 20, I can't remember how big the biggest one is, 25 or something like that. So I understand it's not, I don't know that you can specifically comment on this, but it seems that if we agree to this, if the city council agrees to this and allows this, then one could take any of those really large lots and say, great, you know what, let's take the one house out and let's put 8 houses in because they did it down the street. So I think that's what you're trying to say, right?
Yes, well, that's what I'm asking, if that's, again, if it's setting a precedent for the future.
Let me clarify as far as the question. So as noted, the request that's in front of you tonight is to consider general plan land use designation from the current designation from commercial to residential. Now, they're requesting, if the council says, sure, we're willing to consider a residential project there that happens through this general plan land use designation, that doesn't mean that they've somehow stamped that project with the seal of approval to be approved, because it has to go back, and now they can actually go through the review process of development review with an application for plan development, and as part of that, it has to come back to the board, and then it goes to the planning board, which you as an advisory board are providing feedback to the director. The planning board, though, is actually making a recommendation to the council when it comes to those discretionary permits, including the environmental assessment, and they are tasked with taking into consideration both at another public meeting feedback and their own take on it to say, is it consistent with the general plan? And is it consistent with the surrounding area and neighborhood character? So all the things that you're saying are part of the process that they have to vet in there. So I want to make sure, I think there's a little bit of angst to think, I'm understanding it, but clearly the belief that if somehow the general plan land use designation is given the okay to proceed, that somehow, and the developer may be interested in having it approved as submitted, but that doesn't mean it's a guarantee. It has to go through the process. And in instances in the past, the planning board has requested changes to a plan development, which includes all alternate designs, different requirements, because in essence what they're doing is requesting a plan development to put their own set of development standards that would apply to that particular property. And that's where the question is, well, is it a 20-foot setback? Is it a 15-foot rear yard? You're proposing 12-foot by 12-foot stables, the amount of lot coverage, all that stuff would have to be reviewed as part of that plan development. So it has to come back through the process, and then really you are, at that point, getting into the nuts and bolts
of the specific development standards that would apply to that property. And you're making, and you, when I say you, I'm saying the board would be making, giving feedback to us to give to the director that would be included in the planning board's consideration, but then the planning board would have to vet that, make a consistency finding with the general plan and the zoning code, and then make that recommendation to council, and council gets a whole new crack at the project and go through and vet all that. And then if they approve the general plan amendment with the zone change, then the project is a project and can move forward. But this is in an early stage of the process, but we get it. We understand that there is concerns that as far as what is around them, the project that they're proposing, and they've been quite upfront about it, is very different. As far as size, lot coverage, and overall design, that what is accustomed or what is known to be around them in the project. And by the way, Ninkara was also a PD or plan development, which went through a similar process a while back, but nonetheless a similar process that you're seeing here tonight. So I want to make sure that that's clarified.
Could I ask staff to clarify a part of the question I heard that I think is very, very important to distinguish? If in fact this project in some form goes forward and ultimately receives land use entitlements, does that in fact create a by right entitlement for people in the Rancho to then convert their lots to RPD standards?
That wasn't our question.
No? Okay.
No.
I think there was some confusion, like someone's going to be able to
And I
actually
didn't
go out
think it was
and
like your,
change the land use on their
I'd
lot.
still like to hear the answer.
Oh, okay, okay.
Still like.
I mean, the quick answer is no, that's not possible.
It's not a precedent for that.
Are there any other board questions for staff or the applicant before we move forward?
So the next step in the process is to allow for public input to staff as well as the board. And what we'll be doing is we'll be calling out the speaker cards. If you're interested and have not filled one out, they're available. What I'll do is, as people are speaking, I'll walk around and hand them out and if people are interested. And Scott, if you can just read out the names. Thanks.
The first speaker I have is Paula and Michael Kidby. The next person I have is Lisa, and it's spelled S-T-O-G-E, I think.
Cue music.
Then after that, Nancy Sherwood.
All right, that's Steggy, S-T-E-G-E.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have lived in the Rancho for most of my adult life. As you might have noticed, this is not a typical neighborhood. I have lived in my house for over 20 years. My Rancho property represents my life's investment. We have lost 4 major stables over the years, which means less horses in the Rancho. Mariposa between Riverside and Alameda already has lots of traffic. This is the main route to access trails for equestrians and hikers. Already Riverside Drive has been turned into a freeway alternative. Race speed limits, synchronized signals that do not change unless they are tripped. This promotes more traffic and speeding in the area. We need to keep every precious piece of the Rancho intact for the ability to keep horses. I don't consider this plan low density. It is not in keeping with our present zoning and our precious neighborhood. Thank you.
Nancy Sherwood, 50-year Rancho resident. And I have 2 horses in my backyard, and I live off of an alley, and I think that is absolutely the ideal
way to keep them, but that's me. For other people, it wouldn't work. We really need to, before we even consider this, we need a 5-day traffic study. Trying to get here tonight, it took me about 15 to 20 minutes, and it should have taken me about 3. Riverside Drive, both ways, west and eastbound, were a log jam. Residential areas, which saved me all the time in the world, or I would still be probably in traffic. Have any EPA soil studies been done on this site? Because when I was a kid, this was all very, 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 very top secret stuff, and we had no idea what they were doing, and that's how long I've been riding around here. The thing that bothers me the most is the lot size. When you're dealing with this size of lot, to me, it's row housing. Really, I mean, that's it. And there's some very nice row houses on Chandler's got some, Verdugo's got some, but they're existing non-conforming. That's not allowed now, but under a PDA, it would be allowed. And I really find that to be very, very scary. You know, because we are such a sensitive area and there's so much traffic going on. And it's not a lot, but how many, as far as what you've got here, 34 is not a lot of houses, but how many open seats are there at McKinley Elementary, Jordan Junior High, and Burroughs High? I've heard they are already slammed. I know you guys don't have a problem because your streets are going to be maintained by your own deal. But for the rest of us, you're driving over city streets, and my street is pothole city. It's horrible. So, and all those cars that don't want to drive on Alameda cut through on Elm, where I live, and they go about 40 miles an hour, 45 sometimes down the street in a 25. So there's so many issues, and what you've done looks lovely, but it's the density that scares me the most. Thank you for your time.
The next speaker I have is David, and excuse me if I mispronounce his name, it's Naythons.
Yes.
I'll let him speak, please. And he has 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. I'm David Nathans, owner and operator of David's Horse Hauling Service here in the neighborhood. I've had this company here in the neighborhood for 23 years. The only issue I would have with this project is that it would create a traffic situation, number one, and number two, Riverside Drive is a freeway, of course, it's a very busy street, so I would definitely want to address that issue there with the issue on Riverside Drive. Other than that, I applaud the developer for presenting this project here to convert this land use to a more compatible residential use. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mary Schindler.
Hi. Thank you. I'm here to ask the board tonight to oppose this zone change. It's hard to separate this request for a zone change from the actual project proposal. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. It's far too dense. It's a little bit smaller than Ninkara, so let's say 21 houses. Now, I have heard that the seller who bought this property 3 years ago, who paid over, just slightly over $5 million, have done no improvements on the land, and now they want to sell it for $20 million, 4 times what they paid for it, which puts the designer or the developer in a crunch for what they can sell their houses for. They claim they have to sell, if they put it down to 21 houses, they'd have to sell their houses for $2 million. And who's going to buy that? So now they can build 34 and maybe just go over $1 million. But I say the seller is greedy, and I would say go somewhere else and do your project where it's more open space, where the seller isn't so greedy, and maybe try Palmdale.
The next speaker I have is Frank Schindler. Frank Schindler.
My name's Frank Schindler, and I'm pretty much in harmony with the room here. And for me, it's 21 a fight 21 lots are fighting. You hear that? That's it. That's it. Work it around. Do the drawings again. We all like to look at them if we get them down. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker I have is Caesar Milch.
Hi, thank you very much for coming to the program tonight and showing us. It's the first time many of us in Rancho have actually had an opportunity to see the floor plan, to see what the houses look like, to see what the plan that you are trying to put together for this property actually is. But the big question that goes back to that is involving the community is great. The more we see, the more there might be some possibility that everybody can come together on a project like this. But the biggest thing we have to worry about is you folks sitting right over here. We don't have to worry about it. We all have to worry about it. This is the first high-density project that's going in. You folks are going to also have to consider the possibility of what is going to be happening at Pickwick. Riverside Drive has been put on a anorexic road diet, okay, and I like it. It slows the traffic down. But the problem is we do have Disney. We have ABC. It takes me some time to get from Buena Vista to my house over by Main Street, 25 minutes at 7:30 at night. And that's not when the freeway is bumper to bumper red taillights when you come down Riverside Drive and look that way from the Toluca Lake area. It's the density. It's going to be what's going to be put on the schools. What's going to be put on the infrastructure in Burbank. We are going to be running a deficit this year. If anybody read the Burbank Leader recently, our water and power systems, this is going to have to supply a lot of other infrastructure for this. This is going to be a planned development community, so it's going to have its own CC&Rs. They're going to be responsible for a lot of things within their boundary, but this still will impact our surrounding infrastructure. And then we'll start to change the community, and where does it then end from that point down? Once Pickwick, if that falls, the next block, right going down between Main Street and Chavez Street down there, is all small, little tiny apartment buildings. Guess what? What's to prevent somebody from getting a zoning change when Pickwick gets changed over, tearing down all 12 of those properties in a row, of which my wife and I own 2 of them, and putting in a giant big development in there. That when you force rents up, and the rents go higher and higher, it creates a problem for people that remain in the house. It creates an affordable housing situation with that. You have to plan accordingly, and we'll see where this goes here before, but if we ever get together, we might come up with a solution. If not, we have to consider the alternatives. Thank you for the time tonight.
The next speaker is Doug Weisskopf. Doug Weisskopf.
Must have rode the bridge like here, right?
Yeah.
You're still in traffic, huh?
The next person I have is
We haven't even built anything yet.
It's Joanne Asman. Joanne.
Thank you, and I only have one comment to make. We all know that there was a big fire in Anaheim this week, and there were horse properties, and many people lost homes. The fire chief came on the news and said they would not have lost those houses if they hadn't had such high density and such small space between the houses. So we need to take that into consideration. We're a horse community. We have all the acreage of Griffith Park, and if we had the winds that they had, our whole community would be at stake. Thank you.
Next speaker card, Lynn Brown. Lynn Brown. Next speaker card is Eric Fiat. F-E-I-T.
Fight.
Excuse me.
Yeah. I also just have one comment. It's more of a question. Did I see that the environmental impact is considered after the request is accepted? Is that when that occurs?
If the request is accepted and the applicant submits the application, we'll review the environmental document, or prepare the environmental document concurrent with the review of the project.
So what I heard tonight was that the reason that there is this request in the first place is to not take up people's time with something that will not go further. Doesn't it make sense to first look at the potential environmental impact of something like this before accepting that request for approval?
To prepare the environmental document takes several months to up to a year to do. So the idea is before we work on the general plan amendment, is to get the direction from councils to whether it's something we should even start working on. So that's part of the request tonight, part of the request going to council in 2 weeks.
Is there a way to get an idea what that environmental impact will be before going forward with this? To
No.
get a sense of it.
We know that there will be environmental review required. We'll look at the soils and the traffic, but right now we haven't done that work. So that work would be done if the council authorizes to study the project.
Thank you.
All right. Next person I have is, the last name is Harmer.
Hi, my name is Jay Harmer. I live at 815 South Mariposa. It's right on the end of Carl. Thank you to the members for volunteering, and thank you for being selected. 3 words about this project: density, density, density. Totally and completely out of the nature and character of the community. It just doesn't fit. It just doesn't work, and I oppose it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Julie Kenyon.
I have an issue with the single entry and exit. Do you know how old, is that community going to be served by gas lines? Are you going to have gas service to that community?
Yes.
How old are the gas lines?
This would be part of the feasibility after we get, but that's part of the infrastructure feasibility that we would.
You might want to think about making sure that you have an access and an egress to any community that you're serving with gas lines. I just like to make sure that everybody thinks about that. Take a look at where that is and where we are. Okay? Make sure that you put that in your planning and review. That you're putting people into a situation with gas lines, you know, one way in, one way out. They need to get out, and the rescue and personnel need to get in. You can do the math.
Next speaker, Lisa Dyson, and then followed by Greg Davey.
I'm going to skip some of my points because they've already been mentioned several times. To the city staff, we have a very unique neighborhood in the Rancho. The special nature of our neighborhood draws people from many other parts of Los Angeles and beyond to our quaint little neck of the woods. Does the city have an interest in maintaining and protecting the unique aspects and characteristics of the Rancho? And is this the best we can do?
So, turn this on. As far as the question, yes, we do have an interest in ensuring that whatever is considered for review and a development proposal that comes forward, that it be consistent with the city's general plan as well as the zoning code that applies for it. So the Rancho Master Plan and the aspirational goals that are in there are part of that review and analysis. So that will be taken into consideration. All that information needs to be vetted and it needs to be included as part of that analysis. So if the project is given the option to move forward, that is part of that analysis, is how does that project integrate into the neighborhood? Because at the end of the day, if you've seen presentations made to council, what they're looking at is how do they protect and preserve single-family residential neighborhoods. This is one of those. It's one with an equestrian focus, but that is one of the imperatives. That's one of the focus options that we have to look at. If you've come to the ADU meetings, it's been the same type of discussion. Is what impact does what is that impact going to have to our lifestyle, to our way of life in the Rancho? That is part of the analysis, part of the questions that council is going to have as well.
My name is Greg Davey. I live on Mariposa and I've been in my house 62 years. And I don't like anything about this. I don't like your project. It's like dropping a sardine can in our neighborhood. Big sardine can. And you guys have no clue because you weren't here when the neighborhood, before it's going to be overrun. Traffic, people, pollution, everything. And I don't wish any of you any good luck with your project. Honestly, I thank you all for being here and trying to help us with our cause to save our neighborhood. You know, and so I just say to you, bad luck to you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, hi, everybody. I grew up in Burbank, and that's not something I always confess to everyone. But I will also tell you this. I had a bunch of remarks, and I'm getting rid of them. I've moved away from Burbank 4 times, twice to New York, once to London, once to Chicago, and every time I move away, I come back. And I come back to Burbank. I come back to the Rancho. When I was living in those other places, because I always had a horse, I have to tell all of you that, I went to meetings like this, and I met them, I heard developers. I never heard a developer who went to the trouble that these 2 gentlemen have gone to try to work with us, to try to find a way so that we can coexist. Okay, I'll try to wind this up. You know, look, we can't stop progress. Something we know is going to go into that space.
21.
And is it possible, and I ask this to the board, is it possible that since these gentlemen started their meeting with us tonight by telling us that they listen, is it possible that we can have someone from the board continue to work with them? Let's just say hypothetically that this goes forward. Can we have someone making sure that we have a light, we have as much light as possible that we need from getting cars coming out of that move on to Mariposa? Because yes, I'm one of the horse people riding my horse on Mariposa. So would it be possible, instead of putting up emotional roadblocks, could we have liaisons and see if we can, you know, folks, can't we all just somehow try to work together?
Next speaker is Franklin, and last name is Vermeeulen.
Thanks for hosting this tonight. I'm not sure why they're here, because I think the first thing we have to do is see if we're going to do the zone change. And I don't know how that involves them. I think that goes to you guys first. And this should not be zone changed. It's way too dense.
Next speaker, Nicola Ellis.
Good evening, and thank you for the city for this. Not many cities do this for us, so thank you. And thank you to the board. I hope you're really listening, because they're not. I don't know, they don't understand compatibility, but I think you really should look it up in the dictionary. Zoning is what we're talking about tonight. If you notice, they're not listening. They're giving us a lovely design, but they keep changing it. How do you know if you go ahead and agree to the zoning that they're not going to stick to their plans? There's no guarantees. So the traffic, of course, on Riverside Drive, as everybody's aware of, except these people over here. We've had tragedies, we've had fatalities. We have a school there now, and they're not even acknowledged in their zone of 25 miles an hour. There's no 25 miles an hour posted there, and that's right outside Mariposa. You're going to have more tragedies with the more density in the area. The emergency evacuation is something very, very, very serious. These architects are also the architects for the Pickwick. So, if you allow this, you're going to allow Pickwick. Pickwick is immediately opposite the LA Equestrian Center, which is an evacuation. It only has one way out of the LA Equestrian, and it's one way. You put Pickwick there, then you're going to have a difficulty. You've got horse trailers coming out. I don't know the density of the equestrian, but I really seriously suggest that you research that for the evacuation plans. My question to these gentlemen is, how many neighborhoods have you lost in these fires because of your high density designs? We also have sewer lines, and if you recall, not many years ago, we were dealing with the new sewer lines because we can't handle the capacity. You bring in these high-density properties, that's going to put another strain. We've got the traffic on Riverside that's been mentioned many times, 35 miles an hour, with the school zone that's supposed to be 25. Alameda is 35, and Alameda is 2 lanes of traffic, with single lanes of traffic with horses, bikers, cyclists, and joggers. I don't know if you know the city, and I don't know if they've had permits for this, but every so often, and very, very frequently, about 9 o'clock at night, hundreds of cyclists go down Riverside Drive with flashing lights. I don't think the police are behind all this. I don't think they're supporting it. You have them run into a horse one night, we have a serious tragedy.
Max 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Kevin Kirkpatrick.
I'd basically just like to see, I guess. I'd like to see, just like everybody else, I guess the lot sizes maybe be at least 5,500 square feet or so. Of course, I'd prefer not to have this development in the community, but if it was going to happen, I'd like that, as well as maybe if the architects could take different architectural components from the existing Rancho community in the houses and maybe try to incorporate some of that into this. Possibly, throw in maybe 2 or 3, single level houses. I don't know why I'd say maybe you can't just make the houses look a little different, a little bit more, make them more unique from each other. And that's all.
Next speaker I have is Walter De La Cruz. Walter.
Good evening, board. Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Dr. Bellavros. I first became involved, and I know quite a few of you here, for a long time. I moved into the area purchasing with my military retirement from Vietnam in '73, so I've been around a long time. We bought into Silver Spur Stable, so I'm very familiar with it. I was also the professor at College of the Canyons in Horse Husbandry for 29 years until the current administration docked us 20% in our salary. I am now director for Department of Agriculture. much of what these ladies said is very correct. Looking at it, and obviously it's an emotional thing for all of us. You're very glib, and you are not of our neighborhood. And I'm certainly not being impolite with you gentlemen. You're trying to produce a product. The lady indicated very clearly that certainly there is progress. I think that one of the things, if you're going to have horses, the last horse I had was 16.2, so a 12 by 12 apparently wasn't a 14 by 16. I think your lot size is unrealistic because you can have a 12-foot stall, but I have a question for you. Many of these people here I know, and if I have a 16.2 horse, I'm not going to bring in 1 bale of hay a day. I heard nothing about a tack room. I heard nothing about a feed room. I heard nothing about a horse room. And I heard nothing about a wash rack. So many of these points are very careful. I was just in Alta Loma with our response team. That's Department of Ag out of Spring and 6th Street because we went out there to help horses. And one of the problems was that you're looking at it, and you know it as well as I do. You can smile and nod your head and all the rest of it, but I was out there in that fire, and it was unpleasant. And it was on TV, and it was called proxemics, or density, as the gentleman said. So I think that probably this product, or this project of yours, because it's one of many projects, and you were very clear. So your interest is one thing. I have 2 doctorates. I went to UCLA for my MD. I went to A&M and University of Mexico for my degrees, my other doctorates. I'm not naive. It took a while to get wise and go to work for the government. Well, I went from 80 grand a year to 2.25 a year. It's a big difference. But I also am 24/7. So I think that their point was very well taken. Horses need size. And they need the ability to be handled and treated and shod. All those things that have not been mentioned thus far. And those of you that have horses know exactly what I'm saying. It looks like we'd have to take our horses out. Do you want me to get out of here?
3 minutes.
3 minutes are up, sir.
3 minutes are up.
Okay. Thank you all very much.
Hi, I'm Cecilia Wagers, and I'm a newbie in the Rancho, only 10 years. I get where you're coming from. You're in this, it's a business, you got to make money. But it's not our fault. You perhaps are overpaying for the property. So you might want to reinvestigate that. It's just too dense. I mean, it's going to look like a Tinkertown in there. And saying that you've made yards for horses, you haven't. I live in one of the smallest lots in the current Rancho. It's, I think, a little over 6,000 square feet. I barely would have room to keep my 1 horse back there. So I get the whole, I get it. You're in business, you want to make money. I'm almost on that.
Keep my job.
You want to keep your job, and that's fine. But you have to understand, once you're gone, we live here. And I can guarantee you that our sewer system will not handle 34 houses. Nor will our roads handle 68, the possibility of 68 cars going in and out of there every day. The schools can't handle anymore. And we're in the midst, the city is, of a huge budget deficit. So city services are not really gonna, they're talking about cutting everything. So, I'm done with you. I'd just like to ask you all to, I know that you've heard the word dense, too dense, too dense, too dense. If they want a zoning change, the only one that makes sense is R1H. That's what I would ask you. But we gotta have it, because that also it ensures that the lot sizes will be compatible to putting a horse in there. But a 3,000 square foot lot, I mean, that's like take the count. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more speaker card. I don't know if the others in the audience have speaker cards. It's the last one I was given. Wendy Davis.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I definitely agree with the doctor about what it takes to keep horses, as well as I absolutely agree. Tell me your name again.
Cecilia.
Cecilia, agree with Cecilia. Just putting pipe stalls in a backyard does not make it a horse property. And, you know, horses require, I also have a very small lot. And all of the things that the doctor mentioned, those are things that have to absolutely be there. And my big concern is that, you know, all of the houses in the Rancho are equestrian properties. You've got half of your properties. Your properties with the largest, the largest lots.
Yes.
Well, let's say that when you put those houses on sale, people who don't own horses just go for the largest lots, and they just pull those pipe stalls right out the backyard, right? There's a possibility of having a community of people with only maybe 1 or 2 horses, right? Because the larger lots are going to go, right? And those are the lots that are available for horse keeping. So as soon as those are gone, and if these people are not horse people, right? Well, then what's available in that community for people who maybe don't have an opportunity to buy one of those horse properties? And they still want to move into the Rancho. Well, now they can't put a horse in there. And, you know, our goal is to keep as many horses in the Rancho as possible. And that's my big concern. If you only have 18 horse properties in there, and the largest lots get sold immediately, well, then there's the potential of there being like, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 horses in there in total. Now we have an entire community of people who don't own horses and maybe don't even like horses. I mean, someone was complaining the other day about there being horse poop in the street. That's what we do around here. I would definitely say that these properties have got to be, if changed, if the zoning is changed, it needs to be what we currently have in the Rancho, at least. Thank you.
I have a couple more speaker cards. Steve?
Hi, thank you all for being here. My name is Steve Apostolina. I live on Reese Place, South Reese Place. I'm a newbie. I've only been here for about 10 years. I don't have a horse, but I have many lovely neighbors who do, and I love my low-density neighborhood because I feel that's kind of what it is. And I think I have a rather smaller lot than some of you. I think it's like 6,500 or something like that. And so I started to think, well, what is low density? Is there a formula that you have that they're legally allowed to say? Because they had a plan for 49 homes, and that was low density. That was 25% bigger than what they have now. So where's the cutoff? What means low density? Is there an actual formula for that, and are they meeting that? Or can they just put a rose on everything and say it's low density? I don't know. But what I'd like to say is that this plan, to me, is not low density. We have low density and high traffic right now on Riverside. It's awful. But I think that if that is low density, we need low density to keep the efficacy of what this neighborhood is all about. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Edward Crane. I live on Mariposa Street. Look, I don't want to insult you guys at all, but can you bring up a picture of one of the homes that you're proposing? Sure. Okay, right there. Yeah, this is the 818, not the 661. That looks like Santa Clarita. people that live in Burbank, especially in the Rancho, we don't want to be like Santa Clarita. We want to be like the Rancho area. I mean, you guys saying that you want to keep in line with the Rancho, but you're not. This is not Rancho. I'm sorry. And you know, I'm new to the neighborhood. Unlike a lot of people that say that they're new, they've been here for 10 years. I've been here for 2 years. I don't have a horse. I have a stable, but I have kids. And I don't know if you're aware, but Mariposa Street has lights on both ends. It's like a freeway. I cannot play with my kids outside in the front lawn because it's not safe. If a ball goes out in the street, I see horses going up and down Mariposa all the time, and people from the apartments flying up and down the street. It's just crazy. Bringing in 34 more homes and possibly 2 cars or more per home. That's an additional 68 cars traveling on Mariposa. Probably because of the both lights, it's convenient to get to Riverside, to Alameda, and so forth. So I just wish you guys would just kind of maybe just keep that in mind. Yeah, a lot of us live in the Christian area because we like the benefits of it, we like the vibe of the area, but we have kids too, and you have to take that into consideration as well. That's all. Thank you.
That was the last speaker card we received for this item. Are there any other speaker cards before we close the public comment period? If not, we'll close the public comment period and move and have a board discussion.
So this is the next step in the process is planning the Rancho board has an opportunity to discuss the request that's in front of you, which is the general plan land use designation request, and whether you recommend one way or another on that particular request. Well, like so.
Well, I think today we heard the word high density from us, the audience, the people who live here in the Rancho, even though the builders keep saying low density. So I know for myself, I'm in conformance with that. I'm also concerned, very concerned about the fires, and the builders did not answer the question posed of have they lost any of their developments to fires that we've seen up and down the state. So that is a question. Also, traffic. I live in Riverside and Reese, so yeah, I can definitely attest to the traffic. And I do think that if something ever does go in there, we need to look at maintaining the uniqueness of the Rancho and what we look at as our home and the way we have our house. A lot of people live here 65 years, 40 years, 50 years. I don't think that a bunch of, 2-story homes, a lot of people when they get here, they want to stay. And the ability to go up and down stairs when you're maybe 70 or 80 years old is quite limited, but we don't want to go. I'm not there, but even when I get there, I don't want to leave. So I think that that's important too. And that, of course, is going to take up more land space, and we still want big enough lots to have horses. So again, the sewer, the schools, the city, there's a lot of impact.
I've lived in this community a very long time, moved in the mid-70s. My wife and I bought our first home here. And we love it here. And I look around and I see a lot of my neighbors here. And I've listened to you. And I think that my opinion is that I follow your suggestions. And I've heard what you said. I think the density is too high. There really is compatibility. Lots that are under 4,000 square feet are not 6,000 square foot minimum lots in Burbank. That's the minimum lot. And they're not R1H. So, and I didn't even think about this emergency evacuation problem for one street. I opened my eyes to that. So thank you.
Hello. I think for all of the reasons that everyone stated here tonight, number one, I'm hearing density. traffic, lot size is too small. I too have been stuck in the Riverside Drive traffic. And by the way, I've been here 22 years in my home in the Rancho. I'm a horse owner and homeowner. And so I've seen the evolution, and I've seen the traffic increase, and I've seen, I think, everybody's quality of life sort of get threatened. And lately it feels worse than ever. But all of that aside, I don't think that this particular project is the right scale or proportion for the lot. And I would have to say, if someone was to ask me, I would say that I would be against a rezoning because this project just doesn't fit in. And I think that's about it. I'm listening to you.
Hi. I think what I heard, I mean, density, but what we're being asked tonight is for a general plan amendment. So we're not, I don't think, being asked to decide whether on the level of density, right? So we're supposed to come up with an analysis of yes, to allow them to move forward with their application to have a general plan amendment, or no. And I'm hearing some people say that if it was R1H, that would probably be okay. But I'm not sure if I'm hearing that more than I'm hearing just no to this project, no to this level of density. So can I do a straw poll?
That's an option, but I think once we get to discussion, we can talk to that point.
Okay, so I can do that later?
Yeah, we'll be talking about that.
Okay.
Yes, like everybody else, I live in the Rancho, lived there for 45 years, I'm a horse owner. And traffic is my biggest concern now, as well as with the new development coming in. The density issue, the traffic. Of all the people that spoke tonight, there was one that said, let's look for progress. Everybody else said, we're status quo, we love our neighborhoods, let's keep it that way, we don't want to lose the horses. And that's my feeling on this. I would say if I had to vote tonight, I would say no.
I think I agree with Elisa too. I think the majority of you have said no to any zone change. And again, I'm not sure if the R1H would be something that we would go for. So I'm with you if you want to do, the straw poll. But I mean, I have concerns, and you can tell me that it's not going to set a precedent. I don't care what you say, it's going to set a precedent. And we got another big, huge project. I mean, it can be in its little frame of planned development, but it's still, this is a big deal. I'm telling you, this is pressure. I mean, it really is. And I mean, I don't feel pressure to be on the board, but because I live in the Rancho, I don't have horses, but I love them. I absolutely love them, and I'm very worried about our neighborhood. I really am. So I'm with Elisa. I think we should take the straw poll.
So it seems like there's an interest from at least two to have what we're calling straw poll. So in the staff report, we actually noted that is an option to the board. So what we have on the actual screen here is, and we'll ask the question as such, and then we can take a vote.
No, I meant out there.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
clearly, so the setup is, we've heard the comments from the public, but the idea here is to provide the feedback from the board itself directly to the CD director. So the question then that I pose to you is, if you're interested in having a straw poll as a board, we can do that. You've heard the feedback from the public. You've heard feedback and questions that were provided to staff and the consultant, and you've had some discussion. So the question now is, do you want to have a straw poll to consider the question? And the question being, and let me just read it out and we kind of go from there. Does the board majority support or not support the request to study an amendment to the general plan land use designation from Rancho Commercial to low density residential at 814 South Mariposa Street? And the way we can do it is to do, like typically you have these votes, is there a majority to consider the actual requested amendment? And we can go down the line and say yea or nay. And then we can do a separate question, which is, does the majority of the board not support the request, and do the same vote? So I pose that to you all. We can do that if you'd like. If there's not the interest to do that, then we'll just take your comments as they've been submitted, and we'll forward those, including those comments and questions posed by the public to the CD director as part of the administrative record. Yes, I mean, that would be the option that I'm saying. Is that acceptable?
Is there a chance that I can come up and skip an answer, Lisa?
There was an opportunity to stick to the rules that were set, and we do have the city attorney here. There was an opportunity. So the question's been posed. Does the majority of the board support or not support the request for the amendment to the general plan land use designation from Rancho Commercial to low density at 814 South Mariposa?
What does low density mean?
Exactly.
Good question. I know what that is.
Open up public comment, open up comments again.
We
They
did.
have the power to do that. They
We
have the power
had,
to do that.
the process was set when we first started the meeting. We noted what the process was. So the process now is in the hands of the board as far as the vote. You want to take the vote? We'll go through the first one. Is there a majority support to support for the request for the amendment to the general plan land use designation from general plan land use designation from Rancho Commercial to low density residential at 814 South Mariposa? If you want to do it, we can just say, if you're in support of it, you can raise your hand or not. We'll take that as a no vote.
Just do it individually online.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, let them take the vote first.
I want to ask before the vote. Do we not get to rebut? Questions were addressed to us specifically that we didn't get a chance to address.
Mary, unless I'm doing something.
I thought we get to rebut on Robert's rule. Yeah, this is outrageous.
If you want to answer the one question.
Answer, please answer. Or at least help us ask.
Sure. Let me do this. You're clearly hearing people out in the audience. The applicants want an opportunity to respond to the questions that have been made. Is it?
No.
We don't have public comment. We want to give the opportunity twofold. One, to allow the applicants to rebut or to provide a response to the questions, and then, if so, to consider and entertain the opportunity for people that are interested to provide feedback.
Are we going to be able to look at the questions? I don't think anybody here wants to hear them give another speech.
No.
We're not going to give a
No.
I was going to answer the question.
So, there are questions that we did take down.
Don't say that.
So there are questions that we did take down. We can go through the process of going through those questions, since there was a question regarding low density, and also regarding any soils analysis the openings that are out there as far as within the schools. And the other one being, is it community served by gas lines? And those are the questions that were posed.
Why don't we get the vote first, and then we can hear from them if we want to. Do the vote.
I'll be 3 minutes.
So I think what we're going to recommend is that we take the vote as such, and then from that point forward, this isn't one of those settings where we have a response and rebuttal. We're basically taking feedback from the public, we're taking feedback from you. That's the setup for this particular meeting. So with that said, I'll hand it over to the first board member.
I do not support the request.
I do not support the request.
I do not support the request. I do not support the request. I do not support the request.
I do not support the request.
Real quick, so we've gotten the feedback from you, we have a straw poll from the board. We've got the feedback from the public as well as the feedback that you provided. All that information will be forwarded to the director. That's part of what the Rancho Review Board analysis for the particular request is currently. And then that information will be provided to the council at the subsequent meeting, which was noted before. We go before the council for consideration of the request for the general plan land use designation. There is still, the meeting is still going on, so.
There's one last item. It's public comment on non-agendized items. You got 2 minutes to speak if you're interested to speak about non-agendized items. Nothing else to discuss tonight. If no one's interested, we'll close the meeting.
I'd just like to let you guys know, it's a great neighborhood. You literally could put up 3 or 4 beautiful homes in that area and make all of your money back. Every single cent you put into it. You don't need to do this. You don't need to squander that piece of property in any way whatsoever.
And it's for non-agendized items.
I just want to talk to the city about traffic, not just around, but particularly around town. I know that.
Just in the middle of a hearing or what?
I know everybody's getting up and leaving, but just want to make sure for the sake of the board we have an agenda. So this was an opportunity for people to speak on items not on the agenda. You get 2 individuals that spoke. So that part of the process is now done. The next step is to actually adjourn the meeting. So we don't have it adjourned to a date specific, but if there is, just by raise of hand, if you would like to adjourn the meeting of October 11th, 2017, it's at approximately 8:30. Sounds like there's a majority to adjourn. Thank you.